Hello everyone. In this session I will introduce you to spectral signature. In the displayed RGB image, which is composed of the blue, green and red part of the spectrum, the three channels, someone can see various types of objects, like water, various types of roofs and build-up objects, bare soil, sands, sports fields, different types of vegetation. How we can recognize them? According to the shape, color and hue. Color and hue are created based on pixel values. The pixel values is created based on straight of the reflection or emission of the electromagnetic spectrum from the object. So spectral signature of an object is the variation of reflectance or emittance of material with respect to wavelength. Spectral signature of an object indicates the range of pixel values that represent a creation object on digital image. Spectral signature of objects in digital images is displayed by a histogram or coefficient of reflection through the spectrum or in different channels. It is a kind of identity card of each object in the image. Each object is defined in the image by a range of the pixel values. Due to the fact that we can recognize different objects in the image, some can conclude that they are all different spectral signature. Let's check it the following example. Let's select samples of 4 objects on the scene: roof, water, bare soil and vegetation. They are visible in the legend on the left side of the slide. At the beginning, the color image should be decomposed into component channels. It is necessary to separate them into their constituent channels because each channel displays the same object in different ways. Let's take water for example. In upper part of the image, in the image from the blue and green part of the spectrum, the bottom of the water body can be seen, while in the image from the red part of the spectrum it is not visible. The well-known theoretical fact that the reflection of water is greater in the blue and green than in the red part of the spectrum is observed. Difference in the presentation of the same object in the images can be observed visually and can also be shown using a histogram or pixel values. Histograms show the distribution of grain tone values in an image. On the x-axis there are values from 0 to 255 for 8-bit image, and on the y-axis the number of pixels on that value. Histogram confirm the fact that images from different parts of the spectrum look different. Another theoretical fact is visible from these histograms. Electronic radiation is strongest in the green part of the spectrum than in others. Green image is look more brighter than other two. In order to define the appearance of an individual object in the image, it is necessary to determine the spectral signature for all of them. To determine spectral signature of object, it is necessary to determine samples for all objects of interest. Now the following are examples of sampling the 4 objects listed on slide 2 for the purpose of determining the spectral signature. The first object is a roof. Samples are taken at the same location on each image as far away from the object's edge as possible. In this way, the possibility of mixing reflection of emission from the other object is reduced. Each sample is a set of pixel values that make up an object, in this case a roof. For each set, its statistics are calculated. The minimum and maximum values of the set are read from it, and its other statistical parameters are calculated, such as mean value, standard deviation, or mode. These statistical parameters determine the range of pixel values for which a certain object is displayed in the image, its mean value, and provide information on the homogeneity of the set of pixel values for that object. The interpretation of the roof samples, shown on this slide, is as follows. First, notice that the spectral signature are different for each of the three channels. In all three channels, the range, that is maximum and minimum, are different, and the object is quite homogeneous. In the same way, a water sample is selected, and spectral response or signature are obtained. The spectral signature are also different for each of three channels, and water is also very homogeneous object because the range of pixels within the set is small. The standard deviation is much smaller than that for the roof. In the same manner, a sample for bare soil is selected, and spectral signature are also obtained. The spectral signature are also different for each of the three channels, and they are not homogeneous object, because the range of pixel values within the set is very wide. The highest pixel values, that is the strongest response, is in the red part of the spectrum. The standard deviation is much bigger than that for the roof and water. Looking at objects as whole, it is easy to explain. The surface of the bare soil is undulating, so these bumps create shadows. Bare soil strongly reflect the spectrum, with shadows are dark and other one is white. In this way, the set of pixel values contains a large range of pixels values, which make it very non-homogeneous. Vegetation behaves in a similar way. The highest pixel values, that is the strongest response, is in the green part of the spectrum. Someone can see that shadow appear on the canopy also due to the rough surface, and this causes a large range of pixel values within the samples. And vegetation is an inhomogeneous object. This can also be seen from the amounts of standard deviation for vegetation and bare soil. If the spectral signature of all four objects are analyzed on the basis of channels, it is easy to see the differences in the representation of the objects in relation to part of the spectrum. Everything that was said and interpreted earlier can be easily observed and learned from these histograms of spectral signatures. This analysis has the education purpose of pointing out the different presentation of different objects on different channels. On the other hand, the analysis of spectral signature on the basis of object is more important, because all processing with digital images is performed on the basis of spectral signature, such as detection and extraction of objects or classification of all objects. This is why it is important to get to know the scene well and define the spectral signature of each object. It is necessary to notice which objects are displayed with different pixel values and which are displayed with similar or the same pixel values. Let's explain it on the example of these four objects. Water and bare soil have very different spectral signature in all three channels. That is, their pixel values are very far apart. The classifier will have not problem distinguish those two objects using automatic methods. The comparison of water and vegetation is similar. They are not too far apart in the spectrum in all three channels, but they are not the same pixels values that make up water and vegetation together. In contrast, by comparing the spectral signature of vegetation and the selected roof, it is observed that the same pixel values from both the vegetation and the roof create the roof, create the object. Indeed, the spectral signature of the roof is a subset of the spectral signature of the vegetation. All the values of the pixels that show the roof are also in the spectral signature of the vegetation. In this way, the classifier will not be able to distinguish which pixel should go to which class. Such problems can be solved by calculating spectral indices. The vegetation index will show the vegetation in light gray shades and the roof in dark shades, almost black. A different way of displaying the spectral signature is by means of coefficient of reflection. For each object, the coefficient of reflection are shown in the diagram through the spectrum, from green to near infrared and linked with the line. Deep water, this is calculated coefficient of reflection which is linked to the line. Shallow water, meadow, forest, tennis court, football field, waters and the family house. Characteristic lines for three main classes can be observed: water, deep and shallow. The highest coefficient is in the blue and decreases towards the infrared part of the spectrum. Vegetation, meadow, forest, football field, the coefficients are uniform in the visible part of the spectrum and rise steeply at the beginning of the near infrared and are the biggest in the near infrared part of the spectrum. Build-up object, tennis court, warehouses, family's house, the maximum coefficients are in the red part of the spectrum. The reflection in other visible parts of the spectrum and near infrared depend on the materials from which the object is built. As for bare soil, its lines behave similarly to the lines of built-up objects. Everything present so far are referred to the images created by the reflection of the electromagnetic spectrum. Although digital images are created by means of emitted energy fundamentally different that those created by reflection, the method of determining the spectral signature of them is the same. The values in the digital thermal images are written in numbers, as in the reflected ones, in the corresponding numbers of bit, but those are converted into temperature values in the software for interpreting and processing of thermal images. This is the basic difference in interpretation. On the slide you can see the thermal image of some settlement. The range of temperature values that appear in the images is visible below the image. Minimum is 10.5 and maximum 25.2 degrees Celsius. Objects in the picture are recognized by the temperatures values. That's how can be distinguished house, road, vegetation. However, the determination of the spectral signature is the same as described earlier. A sample of vegetation is determined and its histogram is plotted to show its position in the temperature range of the image, R1. The temperature range is the y-axis and the number of pixels of a certain temperature is on the x-axis. The spectral signature of the roof was further determined, IR2. It can be seen that these two spectral signatures, 1 and 2, are significantly different distance on temperature scale, and that the classifier should have no problem distinguish these two objects through automatic processing, such as classification. The same thing is repeated with the road, with IR3. There is no overlap of temperature values, that is, pixel values represent the vegetation and the road, IR1 and IR2. 3. But if the spectral signature of the roof and the road are compared, 2 and 3, there is an overlap of temperature values. The temperature range for the roof is from 15.5 to 6 degrees Celsius and for the road 15.9 to 60.5 degrees Celsius. Those common values will confuse the classifier and may or should lead to misclassification of those pixels. And finally, the sample of the fourth remaining main class was determined, bare soil, IR4. If the bare soil temperature values are compared with the red values, there is no overlapping of the values from 3 and 4 sample. That would be all for this presentation. Thank you for your attention and see you in next presentation. Bye.